Now, that wouldn't explain the airships in 1890, 1897, 1896, 1897, where, interestingly enough, at that time, it appears that the Harriman Railroad magnates were involved in investigating or funding this airship development. J.P. Morgan was involved. Rockefeller was significantly involved because Rockefeller was discovering oil and setting up the, oil as the primary source of non-renewable energy at that time. So if you think of the railways as the main mechanism by which, material was transported, shipping took place, right, along, continental distances. Well, that rail industry is definitely going to be threatened by an airship invention. And then you think about, oil as a source, petroleum as a source for powering, what were also the first automobiles that were being developed at the time. And you could see how Rockefeller and his oil industry would be threatened. So if you see people like Harriman and Rockefeller involved in, the 1897 airship mystery, and then you look at the fact that J.P. Morgan, who seems to have been a New York financier for some of these airship people, J.P. Morgan was also Nikola Tesla's financier and bought up basically all of Tesla's patents only in order to bury them, possibly, though, to also hand them to this secret group who were doing parallel work, in a parallel work. I don't want to say in a classified manner, but, in a way that was never intended to benefit the general public, right? And so there you could have a breakaway civilization that dates to the 1890s. That's another possibility.
Yep.
But then you have to look at the empirical evidence for Atlantis, or whatever you want to call it. Sure. In other words, some worldwide super advanced civilization engaged in, megalithic, engineering with a degree of precision that we're barely capable of today. And and then all the accounts across various ancient cultures of flying machines associated with these civilizer gods, right? Yep. So is the breakaway civilization actually a survival of Atlantis, where even though this worldwide technical culture was destroyed on a large scale, it somehow went underground or went underwater and broke away from the public sphere at that time, 12,000 years before the present. And it's been, engaged in managing affairs and socially engineering the various civilizations of our planet ever since then. So that's another potential explanation of the origin of the breakaway civilization, namely that it's some kind of a survival of Atlantean culture. And by the way, I was told by this same CIA officer who sat in roundtable meetings with Avril Haines, same guy told me that, which really aggravated me, by the way, that this book was being read in the CIA and in the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he grilled me for about an hour and a half, asking me how I figured this out and how I figured that out. And like, basically, it looked like he was trying to plug a leak, and he thought I was getting inside information from various people. And he was like, listen, somehow you managed to put, 80% of the jigsaw puzzle pieces together in the same way that we did. How? And one of the things he said to me was, we know about the Atlanteans and their connection to this. And one of our security issues is that we know that these people aren't coming from another planet. They have submarine, not just facilities, but like city-sized bases under the oceans, and that they represent a survival from the Atlantean civilization. Wow. So you could have a breakaway civilization that started from 12,000 years before the present. And then the final possibility, which actually it encompasses and incorporates all of these data points, is that it's a breakaway civilization from the future. Yeah. And the defense contractors become these Nordics 100, 200 years into the future, whatever, and they violate the timeline, okay? So that they reach back into the past to become the Atlanteans, which then explains, how this civilization, on the one hand, is demonstrating tremendous engineering capability, but on the other hand, doesn't have any organic evolutionary history in the human anthropological record, as if like they dropped out from somewhere, right? Not from another planet, but possibly from out of the human future, and contaminated the timeline. So it could be that it could be that the breakaway civilization begins with the 1890s electrogravitic airships. It continues with the 1950s, further advances in the aerospace industry of the Anglo-American deep state, becomes these time-traveling Nordics who then reach back from the future and seed Atlantean civilization, which then becomes a breakaway civilization, continuing to manage affairs on the planet. So, my apologies for how convoluted that spider web is, but it may in fact be what we're dealing with.